Welcome to day 49 of our Tgpsc Group 1 Masterclass. Today, we break down a critical turning point in Paper V, focusing on the 1991 LPG reforms and Telangana's marginalization. This module features a complete active recall flashcard evaluation consisting of 25 high-yield questions and solutions covering liberalization, Cyberabad development, and structural inequalities. Let us begin. Question 1. What were the historic 1991 LPG economic reforms, and which central political leaders initiated this transition in India? Proceed to the next slide for the answer. The correct answer is LPG stands for Liberalization, Privatization, and Globalization. Enacted in July 1991 to resolve a massive balance of payments crisis, it dismantled the license permit Raj, lowered import tariffs, privatized state-owned enterprises, and opened Indian markets to foreign direct investment. The political architecture of this transition was steered by the Union government under Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, who provided the crucial political will and strategy, and Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who drafted the landmark economic policy papers. Question 2. How did the 1991 reforms radically shift the state's role in regional economic development? Proceed to the next slide for the answer. The correct answer is the 1991 reforms shifted the state's role from a direct welfare provider and primary investor in public infrastructure to a market facilitator designed to attract private corporate capital. State developmental priority transitioned from balanced rural growth towards highly concentrated, elite urban corridors that appealed directly to foreign investors and multinational corporations. This led to the gradual withdrawal of essential state support structures, particularly in rural cooperative banking, agricultural subsidies, and localized social welfare sectors. Question 3. Who was the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh during the late 1990s who aggressively steered the state towards this market-led IT vision? Proceed to the next slide for the answer. The correct answer is Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu served as Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh from 1995 to 2004, presenting himself as the CEO of the state. He bypassed traditional bureaucratic files to align state policies directly with global IT giants, private venture capital, and multilateral lenders like the World Bank. Naidu drafted the ambitious Vision 2020 document, which projected a fully digitized, market-led economic model for Andhra Pradesh. However, this vision heavily sidelined agrarian interests and rural regions of Telangana. Question 4. What specific geographic enclaves in western Hyderabad were targeted for the creation of high-tech IT parks? Proceed to the next slide for the answer. The correct answer is the state government created a massive designated enclave known as Cyberabad in the western fringes of Hyderabad. This localized high-tech corridor, shown here in the architectural layout of high-tech city, was carved out of rural lands and quickly transformed into corporate campuses. Key pockets included Madhapur, Gachibowli, Kondapur, Manikonda, and Nanakramguda. This highly specialized geographic layout was designed to insulate global multinational corporations from the standard municipal problems of the remaining capital city. Question 5. What is the significance of the cyber towers inaugurated in 1998 in the history of Telangana's economic landscape? Proceed to the next slide for the answer. The correct answer is inaugurated in November 1998, the cyber towers, the prominent, cylindrical modern office structure pictured on your screen, was the flagship infrastructure block of Phase 1 of High-Tech City. It acted as the ultimate physical symbol of state-backed corporate transition, providing elite facilities like high-speed connectivity and uninterrupted power lines to lure global tech giants like Microsoft. However, Telangana activists highlighted it as a monument of inequality, built utilizing public revenues while the rural districts of Telangana faced extreme starvation and electricity blackouts. Question 6. How did the state finance the elite urban infrastructure of Cyberabad, and how did this affect regional resource allocation? The correct answer is the state financed Cyberabad by diverting common funds. Public revenues collected from across the entire state, including taxes generated from backward regions, were concentrated into building roads, flyovers, and substations for western Hyderabad. Furthermore, elite water supply lines were prioritized for Cyberabad's tech towers while rural Telangana villages suffered from fluoride-contaminated drinking water and dry borewells. This effectively starved public sectors, heavily slashing budget allocations for rural health centers, localized minor irrigation, and government schools in Telangana's districts to balance the tech infrastructure expenditure. Question 7. Explain the concept of two Hyderabaads that was extensively formulated by Telangana activists during this era. The correct answer is, the concept contrasts globalized Cyberabad against the neglected traditional base. Cyberabad was a shining, air-conditioned corporate island in western Hyderabad featuring high-paying IT jobs, glass and steel skyscrapers, and luxury housing enclaves. It received priority allocation of an uninterrupted electric power grid and premium amenities, dominated by multinational corporations and non-local corporate elites. Conversely, the remaining historical city and rural Telangana heartlands suffered severe civic neglect, failing municipal schools, and collapsing healthcare. This traditional base was saturated with low-paying informal workers, security guards, and daily laborers who faced prolonged power cuts and agricultural despair right outside the tech gates. Question 8. What major agrarian crisis plagued rural Telangana in the late 1990s as a direct consequence of market-led developmental priorities? Rural Telangana's deepest tragedy during this era was widespread agrarian bankruptcy. As state expenditure on public irrigation dried up, Telangana peasants were forced to sink expensive, deep private borewells, causing them to fall into severe, high-interest credit traps. With the simultaneous withdrawal of state seed, fertilizer subsidies, and crop loans, agricultural margins collapsed entirely. This led to a historic and tragic wave of farmers' suicides across Warangal, Karimnagar, Nalgonda, and Mahabubnagar districts, exposing the dark, ignored reality of the heavily praised AP success story. Question 9. Why did the traditional handloom weavers of Pachampally and Sirasilla face mass bankruptcy and suicides in the post-1991 era? The correct answer is, the handloom crisis was triggered by a steep hike in electricity tariffs. World Bank-mandated power reforms drastically increased tariffs, crippling localized powerloom operations in Sirasilla. Simultaneously, the state government abolished support subsidies, withdrawing traditional yarn subsidies and folding the thrift fund schemes that protected weavers from market price swings. The cooperative textile networks collapsed under cheap corporate competition, driving hundreds of handloom artisans to commit mass suicides and turning Sirasilla into a national symbol of agrarian and artisan despair. Question 10. How did the state government utilize its eminent domain powers to acquire lands around Ranga Reddy district for Cyberabad? The correct answer is, the state government utilized the Land Acquisition Act of 1894 to aggressively seize land around western Hyderabad under the pretext of public purpose. Targeted properties included assigned farming lands of marginalized scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, common village pasture lands known as Gairan lands, and small peasant holdings in Ranga Reddy district. These lands, acquired at nominal compensation from native farmers, were systematically allotted as a corporate gift at heavily subsidized rates to multinational IT giants, private real estate conglomerates, and luxury townships. Question 11. Who were the primary corporate and economic beneficiaries of the hyperinflated real estate boom in Hyderabad? The correct answer is, the economic benefits of the hyperinflated real estate boom were characterized by non-local capital dominance. The skyrocketing land values of Cyberabad were heavily captured by powerful real estate developers and contractors originating from the coastal Andhra region. Backed by the state, all major contracts, outer ring road planning corridors, and infrastructure bids were monopolized by Andhra business politician syndicates. Consequently, native Telangana populations faced total exclusion, priced out of their own capital city's housing market while their ancestral soils were commercialized to enrich external corporate portfolios. Question 12. What structural factors caused local Telangana youth to be locked out of the high-paying jobs in the newly emerging IT sector? The correct answer is, the rapid growth of elite corporate IT jobs created a severe educational disadvantage. These roles required advanced software training, professional English communication, and urban corporate networks. Telangana youth, educated primarily in underfunded regional state government schools and colleges, suffered from a massive structural skill and language gap. Furthermore, large corporate campuses focused on non-local recruitment pools, hiring heavily from corporate engineering colleges in coastal Andhra or southern metros. This relegated local Telangana youth to informal roles like security, housekeeping, and driver jobs inside the tech zones. Question 13. Did the historic Government Order No. 610 or Mulki rules apply to the newly emerging private IT and multinational sectors in Cyberabad? The correct answer is, there was zero private sector validity for regional safeguards. Public employment protections, including Government Order 610 and the local zonal reservations of the 1975 Presidential Order, had absolutely no legal validity in private sector firms. Multinational IT corporations, like Microsoft, Oracle, and GE, held complete, unchecked autonomy in recruiting personnel from any part of India or the globe. This policy loophole meant that as the state economy shifted heavily from public sector jobs to private sector employment, Telangana's protective job safeguards became effectively defunct. Question 14. What specific role did the World Bank play in micro-managing the economic policies of Andhra Pradesh in the late 1990s? The correct answer is, the World Bank exercised control through direct loan conditionalities, funding Andhra Pradesh's development via multi-million-dollar structural adjustment loans, known as APAL-1 and APAL-2. These massive loans came with strict policy mandates requiring the state government to aggressively downsize public sector staff, freeze new state recruitment, and privatize public utility systems. Additionally, the World Bank demanded power sector restructuring, unbundling the Andhra Pradesh State Electricity Board and mandating steep, automatic consumer power tariff hikes that hit Telangana's agricultural and powerloom belts first. Question 15. What was the historic Bashirba protest of August 2000, and how did it expose the rural-urban policy conflict? The correct answer. The Bashirba protest was a violent clash over utility tariffs. On August 28, 2000, thousands of peasants, powerloom workers, and political activists marched to Bashirba, Hyderabad, protesting World Bank forced power tariff hikes. The peaceful public rally faced brutal, armed police firing, resulting in 3 activists being tragically martyred and dozens injured. This incident became a watershed moment, proving to the public that the state administration would use lethal force against its own citizens to protect global market adjustment policies. Question 16. How did the massive privatization of professional higher education in the 1990s impact local Telangana students? The correct answer is, the 1990s saw a massive private engineering explosion, as the state authorized a surge of private, self-financed engineering and medical colleges around Hyderabad and major towns. However, there was heavy coastal capital control, with over 80% of these highly profitable private institutions owned and operated by powerful educational cartels from coastal Andhra. High capitation fees and opaque management quotas locked out qualified but impoverished Telangana students, effectively keeping elite professional education out of reach for local families. Question 17. What was the consequence of the state's hyper-focus on Cyberabad on the backward districts of Telangana, such as Mahabubnagar? The correct answer is, the hyper-focus on Cyberabad led to the systematic neglect of district budgets across rural Telangana. Mahabubnagar, historically drought-prone, was completely starved of basic canal irrigation funds, resulting in the drying up of local water reservoirs and tube wells. This neglect forced over 1.5 million rural peasants from Mahabubnagar to migrate as distress construction laborers. Known widely as Palomar labor, they were ironically utilized to build the very roads and glass towers of Cyberabad in which they held no economic share. Question 18. Define the concept of capital flight in the context of Hyderabad's economic development after the 1991 reforms. The correct answer is, the mechanism of capital flight operated through the extraction of local revenue. Massive public revenues were generated within Hyderabad's borders through land sales, municipal taxes, and industrial excise levies. However, instead of being reinvested to develop Telangana's backward districts, these surplus public funds were siphoned off to develop Andhra coastal delta zones and private corporate assets. Through private profit channeling, the gains of real estate ventures and state contracts were routed directly into the bank accounts of non-local business dynasties, depriving the local economy of circulating wealth. Question 19. How did the state-backed land acquisition of assigned lands directly bypass constitutional protections for marginalized scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities? The correct answer is, under the AP Assigned Lands Prohibition of Transfers Act of 1977, land allocated by the state to poor scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC families was strictly non-transferable and could never be bought or sold. This law was enacted to protect marginalized peasants from land grabbing by wealthy speculators. However, the government engaged in state-enforced resumption, bypassing this protection by resuming these assigned lands under eminent domain for corporate infrastructure projects. The poor families were evicted with tiny compensations, while their lands were handed over to private developers. Question 20. What environmental and structural damage was caused to Hyderabad's historical chain of tanks during the real estate boom? The correct answer is, to satisfy the hyper-inflated real estate demand, historical minor reservoirs, irrigation canals, and natural drainage channels known as nullas were systematically filled and paved over. This broke the flow of the ancient Kakatiya-era network of interconnected lakes, preventing rainwater from safely cascading from one tank to another during heavy monsoon spells. This environmental destruction resulted in severe, frequent urban flooding in residential areas, exposing the severe ecological cost of unchecked real estate expansion. Question 21. How did the systemic shift from public sector employment to contract and outsourced jobs impact constitutional scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC reservation rosters? The correct answer is, under World Bank economic guidance, the state initiated the outsourcing of state services, stopping the creation of permanent government posts and relying heavily on contractual outsourcing for clerical, municipal, and technical services. This shift allowed departments to fill vacancies through private contracting agencies. Because private contracting agencies are not legally bound by the state's constitutional reservation rosters, this practice effectively bypassed the reservation system for SC, ST, and OBC candidates, rapidly eroding social justice protections. Question 22. Why did Telangana activists classify the post-1991 economic growth model as a form of internal economic colonialism? The correct answer is, the framework of internal colonialism is defined by resource extraction, an unequal division of labor, and a drain of wealth. Telangana's core resources, including land, groundwater, and local tax revenues, were extracted to build a highly specialized corporate tech corridor. A sharp division of labor emerged where non-local candidates secured high-paying corporate positions, while native Telangana workers were relegated to low-paying informal roles. Finally, the economic profits generated within Hyderabad were drained out to benefit external corporate interests, reinforcing the regional developmental divide. Question 23. Who established the Software Technology Parks of India, or STPI, in Hyderabad, and when did its operations commence? The correct answer is, the Software Technology Parks of India in Hyderabad, whose early infrastructural footprint can be seen in the dark night view of the corridor on your screen, was established by the Union Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in 1991. It commenced operations to boost software exports by providing high-speed satellite links and tax-free enclaves for technology firms. This early central government initiative laid the foundational infrastructure for software exports, which was later utilized by the state government to build the broader high-tech city brand. Question 24. How did the post-1991 economic landscape redefine the central demands of the separate Telangana movement? The correct answer is, the economic landscape forced the movement to look beyond government jobs. In its early phases, the statehood movement focused on securing fair representation in government jobs and budget allocations under unified Andhra Pradesh rule. However, the post-1991 economic transition showed that the state's growth was driven primarily by private and corporate capital, rendering traditional public safeguards ineffective. This shift convinced activists that regional safeguards were completely insufficient, redefining the movement's goal from mere policy reforms to an absolute demand for sovereign self-rule over land, resources, and economic policy. Question 25. What was the Janmabhoomi program of the late 1990s, and why was it heavily criticized by Telangana activists? The correct answer is, launched in 1997 by Chief Minister Naidu, the Janmabhoomi program aimed to foster community-led rural development through voluntary public labor and state matching funds. However, it faced severe criticism for bypassing local panchayats. Telangana activists demonstrated that the program was used to bypass self-governing village bodies, consolidating administrative control at the state level. Furthermore, it resulted in contract diversion, as the system was utilized to award small local development and civil contracts to non-local political workers, siphoning rural funds away from local communities. Day 49 is complete. You have successfully completed the active recall evaluation deck for the 1991 LPG reforms and Telangana's economic marginalization. This concludes our session for Paper V of the Tgpsc Group 1 Masterclass series. Keep practicing active recall, revise your notes, and I will see you in the next session.